I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. I want to advise that this meeting is being live streamed and archived, and I would also like to request that all cell phones be turned off during the meeting. That the agenda for the regular board meeting of December the 10th, 2019 be approved. Moved by Trustee Hunda, seconded by Trustee Cosmerly. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Preliminary declarations of pecuniary interest. There are no presentations this evening. There's no report from the in-camera committee of the whole. Previous minutes, motion that the minutes of the regular board meeting held on Tuesday, November the 19th, 2019 be approved. Moved by Trustee Morrison, seconded by Trustee Clement. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Reports and recommendations from board committees. We have a report from the Audit Committee, and I'd like to call on Superintendent of Business, Dennis Bazinet. Oh, sorry, I'm going to call on the Chair of the Audit Committee first.
No problem. I thought I got a promotion that time, so thank you. Just on behalf of the Audit Committee who met yesterday, and I want to thank staff for their support who are sitting in the audience. Thank you, Karen. The next thing on our agenda is the presentation of the financial statements, and that was one of the things that the Audit Committee did yesterday as part of our regular business. But the reason I'm reporting as Chair of the Audit Committee is that there is a regulatory requirement that we report to the board annually. There are certain requirements in terms of we've got to indicate what we did over the year, how many times we met, and there's a report that's been placed in front of you. So I think everybody has it on the table. But what you'll see on there is the members of the committee. So there's myself, we had Trustee Stringer, Trustee Hunda, we had two external members who are both accountants and auditors themselves. So 5 of us make up the Audit Committee. Our regular attendees at our Audit Committee are Director Blazek, our Superintendent of Business, Dennis Bazinet, Karen Cosman, our Manager of Finance, Heather Thurkel as a Recording Secretary. We also had Derek D'Angelo, who's sitting in the audience here tonight, is going to be presenting our financial statements. He's the auditor from KPMG, who leads the audit team from KPMG, and Melissa Dodge often joins us as well. She's the Regional Internal Audit Manager. She's the one I've mentioned before, who is the Regional Internal Audit Manager for 8 boards in Northeastern Ontario. That group provides generally around 2 internal audits for us every year. So the following administrative tasks were completed during the 18-19 fiscal year. We reviewed the multi-year internal audit plan. Some of these things will sound familiar to you because you've seen the results of that work come to the board to be approved. So one of the things we did do was review the multi-year internal audit plan. We had 2 meetings during this year, December and then September 23rd, 2019. We had quorum at all of our meetings. The Audit Committee operated throughout the fiscal year, and all members satisfied the eligibility requirements in accordance with the Ontario regulation. This is a highly regulated committee, so if I'm mentioning all these formalities, there's a reason for that. We have to sign off that we're doing all of this. We also did an assessment of our relationship with both our external auditors and our internal auditors. Both of those relationships are satisfactory, and when I say that, in my own words, I would rate them as good, but we can only rate them as either satisfactory or as unsatisfactory. So I would indicate that our committee has said that both relationships are good with both external and internal auditors, as are the relationships with staff, because the other thing we do is we ask all staff to leave the room and we have a conversation with our auditors about the level of cooperation, for example, they've had throughout the audit process, any big major errors that had occurred that they wanted to bring to our attention privately, and we had that meeting again yesterday. We had it last year as well. So we didn't have any unplanned audits. We had, we've got a couple of things that are still in the works. We've got an attendance support data visualization consultation, which is basically an attendance management visual reference, and that's coming to us in the coming year. We've had 43 recommendations made. And as of August 31st, 28 of those 43 have been implemented. 15 are past due. Most of those are related to the IT area, and sorry, George, for looking at, we know this is a massive initiative. Our IT process, as was reported to the audit committee, to the board previously, was audited by Deloitte, and it's quite an extensive review, so there's a number of things that are going to be taking probably a couple of years to accomplish. Management action plans not yet due or to be followed up on is one. In addition to the items noted above, the following outlines the further work that was performed by the audit committee in the last 12 months. We recommended the 18-19 external audit plan to the board for approval. We evaluated the performance of our external auditors. We received the 18-19 Northeastern Ontario Regional Annual Internal Audit Report. We evaluated the performance of the Regional Internal Audit Team. We completed the Audit Committee Self-Assessment Questionnaire, and we reviewed ministry correspondence. I signed off on behalf of the committee on this yesterday, who gave me a motion and support to do so. And that's my report, Madam Chair.
That's a very intensive, extensive committee that you're reporting on, Trustee Morrison. And now I'd like to call on Superintendent of Business. Oh, sorry. We have questions from Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Dewar. Just a brief question to Chair Morrison of the Audit Committee. Regarding the, you mentioned a lot of things are covered by the regulation. So I'm noticing that we had 2 meetings during the year. Is that the minimum under the regulation, or is that out of our choosing? Or I'm looking at the regulation that says under Section 11, Part 1, an audit committee of a board shall meet at least 3 times in each fiscal year.
Yes, if I could.
Trustee Morrison.
We normally would meet 3 times a year, but there was a number of reasons why we couldn't meet for the 3rd time last year, including there's other things that related to quorum on this committee that don't necessarily apply to other committees. For example, our external partners, we always have to have one of them available. We can't proceed if both of them are unavailable, and we have to have, so we've got to have 2 elected trustees and one of the 2 external members, and if we don't reach that, we don't have quorum. So we're reporting what we actually did. What we did was 2. We've had as many as 4. We always have 3. This was the first year we had down to 2. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Superintendent Bazinet, 3rd time lucky. I've introduced you now.
Thank you,
Sound for real.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Trustee Morrison has indicated, as a follow-up to the Audit Committee meeting, which was held yesterday afternoon, we're pleased this evening to present to the entire board the financial statements for the fiscal year that ended August 31st, 2019. Before I introduce our member from KPMG who will lead us through the presentation, I just want to acknowledge all the support and hard work from our finance department, which is led by Karen Cosman, our manager of finance, and she is supported by our financial analyst. And of particular note is Yvonne de la Moranzière, is her contribution towards preparation of not only the EFIS submission, but working closely with the audit team in preparing these financial statements. So I would like to invite Derek D'Angelo, who is the lead audit engagement partner, to come to the podium and present the highlights of the statement to the trustees. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to present the statements of the Rainbow District School Board for the year ended August 31st, 2019. As mentioned, these financial statements were reviewed yesterday by the Audit Committee and were recommended to the board for approval. So during the course of my presentation, I'm going to provide you with an overview of the relevant points and significant changes from 2018. If you have questions, please feel free to ask at any time, and I will do my best to answer them. And when required, management will step in to help as well. So we're going to just look at the independent auditor's report. As you'll see this year, there were some changes in the auditor's report. This is a new standard that came into play for the auditor's report for the year ended 2019. However, as the board is a non-listed entity, i.e. not on the stock market, the impact is fairly minimal. But I'm going to go through the changes with you as well, just so that you understand what differs from prior years. So one of the big things is that the auditor's report has been reordered. In prior years, the auditor's opinion was at the end of the auditor's report. Now it's right at the beginning of the auditor's report. So you'll see that the first paragraph is entitled the opinion or qualified opinion paragraph. It also expands the descriptions of what management and the auditor's responsibilities are in preparing the financial statements, and there's also an enhanced section on other information. So if we're looking at the report, you can see that the independent auditor's report section, the qualified opinion section, identifies that the statements, which statements have been audited, and it gives our opinion on the accompanying financial statements, and we've given a qualified opinion. We've given a qualified opinion, just as we have for the last many years, due to the inability of the school to ensure that all school-generated funds are captured in its records. There's a lot of cash transactions, and it's unclear if all of them can be recorded in the system. So this is a standard practice for, I would say, majority of not-for-profit organizations that have extensive fundraising activities. And as you'll see, there's a significant portion of the activities of Rainbow are included in the school-generated funds. We feel there's no financial risk to the Rainbow District School Board with regards to this, but there's a potential for reputational risk should an issue occur. And the financial statements will be dated December 10th, assuming they're approved at tonight's meeting. The third section is entitled the Emphasis of Matter, or the Financial Reporting Framework. Basically, this describes the basis of accounting that is followed in completing the financial statements. And in this case, it would highlight the significant differences between this basis and Canadian public sector accounting standards. Moving on to the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance section. This, again, as mentioned, this is a significantly expanded section, but it doesn't really do anything different than it did in the past, but it just describes the responsibilities of management in the preparation of financial statements. And it also describes that management is responsible to develop and maintain a system of internal control that is necessary to ensure that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. The final section is the auditor's responsibility section, and you can see this goes on for about a page and a half. What this does is it describes the auditor's responsibility is to express an opinion on the financial statement based on the results of the audit work we perform. We have to ensure that the audit was conducted in accordance with Canadian generally accepted auditing standards, which requires us to comply with ethical requirements and to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Again, we use the evidence that we find during the course of our audit to ensure that the amounts in the financial statements and the disclosures in the financial statements are accurate. We use our professional judgment, including assessing risks, considering the internal controls that are relevant to the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. We also evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies selected by the board and the reasonableness of the accounting estimates made by management in preparing the financial statements. And again, we evaluate the overall presentation of the financial statements. And you can see, as I mentioned, it will be dated December 10th, assuming it's approved tonight. So I know you have these in your package. The numbers are a little small on screen. Try to make them a little bit larger. I don't know if that's a little easier. So looking at page 1, which is the consolidated statement of financial position, what this does is this statement details the financial position of the board at a point in time, being August 31st, 2019. It would include the cash resources of the board, the net debt position, which is calculated as the difference between the financial assets and the financial liabilities, the non-financial assets such as prepaid expenses and tangible capital assets, and the accumulated surplus. So looking at the financial assets, at year end, you can see that the balance in the bank account was $13.4 million, down from $18.5 million in 2018. The change in cash balance is directly related to the results of the operations, the capital activities during the year, as well as activity in the accumulated surplus and reserves, and I'll go through those in a little more detail later on. One thing to note this year, that effective for the 2018-2019 school year, the ministry implemented a cash management strategy with school boards to refine its operating cash flow schedule and to help reduce the province's borrowing cost. What this meant is that the ministry actually withheld cash during the year, which directly contributed to the reduction in the cash amount at year end. That amount was around $9.4 million withholding at year end. Looking at the accounts receivable other, this balance is mainly comprised of the municipal tax revenue receivable, the HST recoverable from the Government of Canada, tuition fees owing from First Nation communities, and grants receivable from the ministry. As I mentioned, the ministry implemented that strategy, which delayed a portion of the grant payments, and it was based on a set calculation that was made. So in these statements, in the $19.6 million of accounts receivable other, there was a delayed grant payment of $13.2 million from the ministry. So our net receivable from the ministry at year end, because there was a $400,000 amount owing back, was actually $12.8 million, which is a significant change from what it would have been last year. Accounts receivable approved capital funding is a receivable from the province based on how grants are paid to school boards for capital. The grants have been approved by the ministry and the board and are directly related to the debt incurred for capital construction. Investments at $557,000 are comparable to 2018, and there's really no significant changes to discuss here. Looking at the financial liabilities, the temporary borrowing at $2.3 million relates to interim financing for construction costs for school improvement projects. The ministry funds these construction costs twice a year based on the actual expenses incurred, and also provides funding for any interest incurred on the temporary borrowings. Accounts payable and accrued liabilities have increased from $14.5 million up to $15.8 million in 2019 due to an increase in trade accounts payable as a result of the construction projects that occurred during the summer of 2019. The remainder of the balance is mainly comprised of accrued salaries and vacation costs. The net long-term liabilities decreased from $46.5 million to $44.6 million. There were semi-annual payments made, which reduced the debt by the $1.9 million, and the debt is with both the Ontario Financing Authority and the Royal Bank of Canada. Deferred revenue, I'm going to move to one page here. Let me. So this is on page 12 in the financial statements, but it's note 6. Deferred revenue really consists of amounts received by the board that are restricted for purposes in accordance with specific ministry guidelines. So if we look at year end, the special education deferred revenue was $3.4 million. This is up from last year at $2.8 million. It's due to an increase in the special incidents portion and differentiated special education needs funding, as well as an underspend of $1.6 million. The proceeds of disposition deferred revenue amount is virtually unchanged at $1.46 million. Pupil accommodation, this is a carryover at August 31st and is to be used for planned projects in 2019-2020. And the last major one is the amounts restricted by external contributions. This includes tuition fees for international students, and this is tuition that's received in this current year that actually relates to the 2019-2020 school year. Deferred capital contributions, they're at $174 million. They include grants and contributions received that are used for the acquisition and development of tangible capital assets. There was an increase of $8.3 million this year, which is the net amount of the additions of $18.9 million, offset by the revenue recognized in the period of $10.6 million. The employee future benefits liability, this is an extensive note in the financial statements that covers around 3.5 pages, pages 12 to 15. But basically, the note provides details of the board's long-term obligation for retirement benefits, which is the future cost in today's dollars of retirement gratuities, the cost of having retirees on the board's benefit plans, and WSIB. All these amounts are arrived at by the actuaries, and they use employee demographics and information about the board's benefit plans to arrive at this future obligation at August 31st, 2019. As you'll see that the obligation decreased by $950,000 in 2019 due to the actuarial gains that occurred during the year, benefits paid, which was offset by the interest costs and the current period benefit costs. So that left you with a net debt for the year of $171 million, up from $168 million last year. Looking at the non-financial assets, the prepaid expenses are virtually unchanged from 2018. The prepaid expenses in this case relate to the timing of payments for the secondary teachers' wages and also the invoicing that's received from the Transportation Consortium. So in 2019, the 2019-2020 secondary teachers' first pay was on August 31st. So that's actually a prepayment for the next fiscal year. And that's per the collective agreement. And the first 2019-2020 transportation payment was also paid prior to year end. So those are the two major pieces of the $3.6 million in prepaid expenses. And this is consistent with what's happened in 2018. The tangible capital assets are the non-financial assets that are used to provide school services or for administrative purposes or for the maintenance and repair of other tangible capital assets. The total additions to capital assets this year were $19.4 million, offset by the amortization of those assets of $11.1 million. The net increase of $8.3 million brings the net book value of the tangible capital assets to $191 million. And the increases come from major capital projects as well as upgrades at the various schools. And there's major things that happen like roof repairs, renovations, revitalizations during the year. So turning the page to page 2, the consolidated statement of operations and accumulated surplus. What this statement does is it provides information about the board's accountability for its operations and the related achievement of its objectives. The statement also reports on the surplus or deficit from operations and measures the change in the board's accumulated surplus in the period. So at a very high level, revenues have increased by $7 million this year from $201 million to end the year at $208 million. And this increase, when looking down the line items, is all in with the Grants for Student Needs funding, which has gone up around $7 million. The expenses have increased $3.9 million to $203.8 million. Oops. The increase is mainly comprised of an increase in instructional costs of $2.4 million, an increase in pupil accommodation costs of $1.5 million, but all the costs are in line with the approved budgets. And you can see, we'll talk more about this when we get to note 13, but the annual surplus for the year was $4.4 million. Last year was $1.3 million. So the last thing I'd like to move to is to note 13. That's on page 18. So as mentioned, the total annual surplus for the year was $4.4 million, and therefore you'll see that the accumulated surplus would have increased by $4.4 million as well. So I just want to give some highlights of the main pieces of the change. If we looked at items such as the reserves for committed capital, student-focused initiatives, Indigenous education, capital planning, and local priority funds, there's actually a net change of only $82,000 in all those internally appropriated reserves. So really not a significant change. One of the big changes you'll see is that when we get to the externally appropriated unavailable for compliance reserves, that the employee future benefit reserve decreased by $1.7 million. And there was also a $198,000 net decrease in all the other unavailable for compliance reserves. The last two reserves that I mentioned are not available to balance the budget, as these reserves are externally appropriated. So the balance of $2.6 million was transferred to the unappropriated operating accumulated surplus, and as you can see, went from $4 million to $6.6 million at the end of the year. This concludes my portion of the presentation, and glad to answer any questions or try to answer any questions that you may have.
Trustee Morrison?
Forgive me, I am going to ask a couple of questions that we also talked about at some length at the audit committee yesterday, but I think it's important that the full board be aware, so if I'm asking them again, I apologize for that. But I wondered if you could talk to us more about the potential impact of the school cash online process, and what that may do to the qualified opinion of future audit reports.
Sure. So as we spoke about that, we qualified the opinion because of the school generated funds and not being able to track all the potential cash that goes through the board's books. With the move to the school cash online system, it will provide a much greater availability for us to audit those numbers, because we can actually go to the systems and audit the systems behind the school cash online. So this is happening in many different school boards, and you're starting to see more and more of the qualified opinions are starting to become removed because of moving to systems such as School Cash Online.
It would appear that there are no further questions. And thank you, Trustee Morrison, for asking that question. That's something that I had thought of, but then forgot all about. And I'm trying to learn to work that cash thing myself, and wondered, as I struggle with it, I wondered, why on earth did we move to this system? But thank you very much for that explanation, and I thank you very much for your report and for taking the time to come to explain it to us.
My
much
pleasure.
appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. I have a motion I'd like to put on the floor that the 2018-2019 financial statements be approved. Moved by Trustee Morrison, seconded by Trustee Stringer. All in favor? Sorry. Oh, yes.
I'd just like to comment on the motion, perhaps suggest a friendly amendment, that the decisions of all committees that come to the board are usually framed as a recommendation to the board. So that the 2018-19 financial statements be approved as recommended by the Audit Committee.
Is that your amendment? The amendment is moved by trustee Gibson, seconded by? Okay. Okay, the seconder, who is the seconder? Margaret, do you have a problem with it? Okay. Be approved.
Madam Chair, if I could, what we would have done but the agenda was prepared before the audit committee, or that would have been the wording of the motion. So thank you for that clarification.
Thank you very much. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 2018-2019 year-end report, and I'll call on Superintendent of Business Bazinet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is essentially a very brief report. Just wanted to take a moment and look at the note 13 in the financial statements that's been covered by Derek, and just change the format a little bit. And this is essentially the format that is from EFIS, and it's the format that is submitted through EFIS to the Ministry of Education. And it's in regards to our reserves, and I would just like to highlight that the focus essentially is on the 4 rows that are colored. 2 are yellow and 2 are a lighter blue. Essentially, those are the internally appropriated reserves that are under the direct control of the Board of Trustees. So I think it's important to note that those are really the amounts that the board may pass various motions for the use of those reserve funds. The 2 yellow ones are internally appropriated reserves, that essentially reserves that have been put aside for longer term obligations. So the intent is that they would be there to cover any potential needs as it relates to the employee future benefits and retirement gratuities. Our focus and our operating procedures and past practice essentially is whenever we wanted to pass specific programs or services for our students that would be paid for from our reserves, we have always targeted the Student Focus Initiative Reserve as the reserve that would be used to fund these various initiatives. And we see that the closing balance is $4.3 million. The unappropriated, the operating working reserve, is the one that essentially is used whenever we're doing all our various financial cycles. So therefore, that's why at each of the financial cycles, the estimates, the revised estimates, as well as financial year end, we see that we're either adding or we're withdrawing from that portion of the reserve. And we also use this reserve to top up or supplement the student focus reserve. So essentially those are really the 4 numbers, which total $16 million in total, that are under the control, direct control of the Board of Trustees. And we've always operated to draw from the Student Focus Initiative by board motion for individual programs and services for students. And because, as Derek has pointed out, this is a snapshot in time, so it's a balance on the student focused of $4.3 million at August 31st, but we have ongoing commitments that are in the current fiscal year based on prior year motions. So essentially, we have almost $2 million of that 4.3 that is already committed to various initiatives that will occur during the current fiscal year. So it just provides an operational lens compared to the financial statements, which are not really user-friendly from an operational perspective. So in terms of page 2, the next page, essentially it's providing information as it relates to enrollment. And the Board of Trustees sees enrollment at various times during the fiscal years, and there's always the question, why are the numbers always different? Well, essentially what we provide this evening is the actual enrollment that generated funding. So this is the enrollment that generated funding through the province of Ontario as pupils of the board or direct payment of tuition fee-paying students. So this provides a year-over-year summary, and the top portion is broken down in pupils of the board and other fee-paying students. So you can see that over the years at financial year end, when you compare year end to year end, since the 2014-2015, which we've pegged as our starting point, we've had declining enrollment in all the fiscal years except for last year, August 31st, 2019, where we see that when we compare the 18-19 to the 17-18 fiscal year, we had an increase of pupils of the board of 173.76 ADE students. The very last column shows that breakdown, and we see that elementary went up by 224, however, secondary went down by 51. But when we look at the change since 2014-15, we see that the net decline is 226 students. Same approach for the fee-paying students. We see the variation year over year, and we've had a overall decline since 2014-15 of 14.12 ADE students. And then the summary is right below that. The second chart, the bottom portion, is just taking the top two and just combining them into total elementary, total secondary, so you can see the change in the total numbers year over year, as well as the last column, which shows the change from 18-19 fiscal year compared to 17-18. And once again, we see that we increased 235.04 elementary, and we are down 69.79 secondary, for a net increase of 165.25 AD students, although since 2014-15, a net decrease of almost 41 AD students. So when we talk about actual enrollment, these numbers reflect actual enrollment. This enrollment generated funding either through GSNs, through the province, or direct payment by fee-paying students. That, Madam Chair, concludes this report.
Thank you very much. Trustee Morrison?
Thank you, Dennis. And just a quick comment. I mean, there's a reason that you're always giving us the enrollment updates, and Director Blazek just recently did one. We certainly know the direct link to about 90% of our funding directly related to enrollment. So that's why it's so important. And if we ever wanted a recent example of how important this slight increase in enrollment is, I just look at Derek for a presentation of our audited financial statements, which shows for the first time in a while we had an increase in our GSNs. That's as a result of increase in enrollment.
Essentially, enrollment drives the vast majority of overall board funding. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Trustee Gibson?
Thank you, Chair. Do it through you to Superintendent Bazinet. So with regards to our deficit reduction plan, then we're on track with these figures. I know you were looking at an increased enrollment to cover, remember that plan we had to put in a few months back to show how we would cover the fact that our budget was in a deficit position. So the fact that our enrollment has increased year over year from last year, that puts us in good shape in regards to that plan?
Well, certainly we are in very good shape overall, financially as well as enrollment. However, The deficit reduction plan relates to the current fiscal year. This is historical information as of the end of the previous fiscal year. So there's not a direct link between the two. This is historical information, and the deficit recovery plan related to the budget for the current 2019-2020 fiscal year.
So we'd have to be looking at an increase in enrollment next year, is what you're saying, in order for that?
No, given we're in the current period but these numbers are reflective of last year, not current fiscal year.
But I'm talking about just the very last column that shows an actual increase. I know it's not an increase over the 5-year period, but
It's an increase between the two last fiscal years, not the current year at all.
Okay, thank you.
Just to separate them. This is entirely historical information.
Madam Chair?
Trustee Morrison?
But given some of the enrollment data that we've had so far, including the October data that Director Blaza gave us, it's relatively good news. So we would anticipate that that's going to help our financial situation for the current fiscal year.
And on that note, next month, we'll be presenting the revised budget for the current fiscal year, which would reflect the actual enrollment of October 31st, which is our first count date. So that information will be reflective in the revised budget, which is presented to trustees during the month of January.
So thank you very much, Superintendent Bazinet. Much appreciate the information that you've given us. New business. I'd like to introduce Director Blazik to go through the Director's Annual Report. This is always a very exciting piece of information that we get to hear about.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we're waiting, what I'm going to be presenting to you tonight is an electronic version like we started last year. And so you'll see Nicole will be standing up at the podium. She'll be thumbing through the report as I highlight the various sections. So as soon as we're on cue. Okay. So trustees, I'm pleased to present the annual report for 2018-2019. We've prepared the annual report electronically for ease of sharing. It will be posted on the board website in an accessible format next week. This evening, I invite you to view the annual report with me as it is projected on the screen. I will send the link to you so you can read the entire document at your leisure. Like last year, we have added some video stories from the media to bring the annual report to life through the voices of students, staff, parents and guardians, and partners. We will link to these media stories when we post the annual report online, and we will share a few examples with you tonight. Our cover features the most talked about news story from 2018-2019 school year. Of course, the Kindness Ninjas from Larchwood Public School. Their little acts of kindness had a big impact. On the inside cover, we begin the annual report with our vision, our mission, and values, set against a photo of the Lively District Secondary School football team that won the city championships 2 years in a row. In the table of contents, you'll notice that the annual report follows the framework of our strategic directions, with 5 goals under Reaching Minds and 5 goals under Touching Hearts. School boards in Ontario are required to produce an annual report in accordance with the Education Act. In Rainbow District School Board, our annual report also includes an overview of the current budget. On page 1, we continue with trustees who began a 4-year term of office following the municipal election held in the fall of 2018. And our First Nations trustee who was also sworn in April of 2019, taking the oath of allegiance in English and Ojibwe. And the current student trustee was also appointed in the last school year. Page 1 also includes photos of Executive Council. On pages 2 and 3, we continue with the messages from the Chair of the Board and, of course, the Director of Education. This year, we received a directive from the Ministry of Education that the annual report for 2018-19 focus on a number of areas. You will see these reflected in the messages from the Chair and Director, as well as the feature stories and the images that were selected for the document. As mentioned earlier, the annual report aligns with the priorities in our strategic directions. Strategic Directions provides the foundations for the multi-year strategic plan and the annual board improvement plan. Beginning on pages 4 and 5, we focus on our priorities under Reaching Minds and Touching Hearts. In our first feature, we highlight how we provide authentic and engaging learning opportunities. We focus on experiential learning opportunities for students, particularly the specialist high skills majors and the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program, a component of cooperative education. We have done so through voices of 2 students from Chelmsford Valley District Composite School, who is enrolled in the Specialist High Skills major in Health and Wellness, and a student who graduated from Manitoulin Secondary School last June and is now an apprentice carpenter. We have also highlighted the Specialist High Skills major offered in Rainbow Schools. 10 new SHISMs were introduced in 2018-19, while 2 more were under development for the current school year, including one in hospitality and tourism at Espanola High School and a new sector for our new students. On pages 6 and 7, our annual report continues with a story about Sudbury Secondary's ongoing success in mathematics. Students continue to maintain and surpass their results on EQAO assessments, which earned provincial accolades. Sudbury Secondary School was honored with a 2018 Dr. Betty M. Stevenson Recognition of Achievement. The school was highlighted provincially for its purposeful work, which means the staff's math strategies were shared with schools across Ontario. We have reproduced the infographic created by EQAO to highlight Sudbury Secondary School's journey of learning. We commend staff and students for their outstanding achievement. With this story, we demonstrate how we set high expectations and create excitement for learning. Pages 8 and 9, our focus, support students to reach their potential. To illustrate this priority, we talk about how special education interventions supplement classroom instruction. Quote, "No matter how hard it gets, always try." That's advice from a grade 3 student at Little Current Public School who got the hang of reading with help from Empower Reading program. Empower Reading is one of the many special education interventions for students who are not working at grade level and require extra support. Another intervention is Lexia. A grade 4 student at Princess Anne Public School uses Lexia to help her get good at reading. "Lexia challenges me to keep trying," she said, "and now I can read fairy tale books and even Goosebumps." These interventions and others, like the Google Read and Write text-to-speech tool, are having a significant impact. Determining which intervention works best for which student at a particular time in their learning ensures personalization and precision. According to EQAO data from the 2018-19 school year, more and more students with individual education plans are achieving level 3 in all assessments. In fact, in many areas, Rainbow results surpass provincial results with upward trends over time. In our next piece, we play the stock market with students from Llewellyn Park Secondary School and get a lesson on financial literacy. For the first time in history, students from Llewellyn Park Secondary School generated all 4 top spots in the Nipissing University School of Business stock market game. Let's learn more in this report from CTV News.
Four grade 10 students from Llewellyn Park Secondary School in Sudbury have captured top honors in a stock market game, beating out competitors from across Canada. Grade 10 students Ryan Tom, Carter Benson, Gabriel Daou, and Krista Luisa took all 4 top spots. It's a first for the Nipissing University Challenge that sees students invest virtual dollars in an intense 6-week trading competition. This year, the top trader turned $500,000 into $5 million.
I learned a lot of things. I went through a joyride of emotions during this competition, and I learned that you should never give up until the very end.
It's pretty incredible, and the fact that they're grade 10 students is even more incredible because they're grade 9 to 12 students participating in the competition. We had approximately 4,500 students participating.
Along with bragging rights, students could earn up to $2,000 in tuition credits to Nipissing University.
There are many more examples of how Rainbow Schools foster 21st century skills and competencies. Through technology, students access relevant content, engage in interactive inquiries, and dig deeper. And as you will read in the examples that we have provided in this report. Still, under Reaching Minds, we look at how we deepen literacy and numeracy skills by building a positive mindset in math. We visit Marks Day Public School, where in 2018-19, grade 3 students scored 94% in EKO math, far above the provincial average. Math games were introduced as part of the daily classroom instruction, leading to significant gains in addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, the fundamentals of math. Students enjoy problem solving together. Their teacher says they have a blast. She adds, when students master a foundational skill through repeated practice, they achieve better learning outcomes. One student even noted that when she grows up, she wants to be a mathematician. We continue to stay the course with fact fluency, knowing that when students are able to think flexibly about numbers, they will develop greater skill in answering in a variety of addition and subtraction questions. We're also using our vocabulary strategy in the mathematics classroom, ensuring the students have the opportunities to unpack keywords and then engage in problem solving. We now move into Touching Hearts. Our first story on the Mental Health Strategic Plan demonstrates how we nurture physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being by creating a learning environment where young people become strong, healthy, and vibrant individuals without discrimination. Staff and students participated in a number of initiatives to raise awareness, decrease stigma, build capacity, enhance supports, and promote mentally healthy classrooms. We include some examples in the annual report. Educators took part in applied suicide intervention skills training. The Student Senate hosted a Stand Up for Positivity conference. Grades 1 to 6 students participated in the Kids Have Stress 2 program. The program teamed up with Public Health to pilot a social skills training intervention program, and schools hosted wellness initiatives. The board hosted a Headstrong Summit for youth mental health, and staff participated in the Ontario College of Teachers launch of its professional advisory on supporting students' mental health. Our next story needs no introduction. Under Forge Relationships and Build Resiliency. We got a lesson on kindness from the 4 and 5-year-olds at Larchwood Public School. Let's watch a report from CTV News.
Calling themselves the Kindness Ninjas. Some kindergarten students at a school in the Sudbury area are showing that they're ahead of their time when it comes to being socially conscious.
These young students go out of their way to do random acts of kindness for people in the community. CTV's Dana Roberts has more.
I pledge to myself on this very day to try to be kind in every way.
Every day, the Kindness Ninjas start their day with this pledge. Throughout the school year, they have learned the importance of being kind.
If you show kindness to them, they'll show kindness back. Because some people are being extra mean, which we don't think is pretty nice, so gotta take the meanness out and make it into a kind way.
The program started after teacher Natalie Miller saw a similar idea online. She loved the idea of teaching the importance of kindness at such a young age.
It's been huge on their own self-esteem because every morning we're doing our pledge, and it's first to love myself, first to think kindly of myself, and then to think kindly of others. So for us, we just hope they have positive self-esteem and that they pass on that positivity. Positivity leads to positivity, right?
In their school this year, the Ninjas have done hundreds of acts of kindness.
Giving Smarties to the whole school.
And their community, including a visit to the SPCA.
I'm giving the treats to the dog, and he gave me a kiss on my glasses.
The school has even received a grant from the Ministry of Education to help fund their acts to the community. They're hoping to make everyone a kindness ninja.
The concept is wonderful, to set that precedent in the kid's heart to be kind and not always expect something in return is wonderful. It's just a joy.
I'm hoping that they become lifelong kindness ninjas and people in the community, that they volunteer their time, that they give to those in need, and that every day they are thinking kindly about others, but also themselves.
So far, it seems like that message of kindness is working.
Because then no one has a bad place in their heart.
So the students at Larchwood Public School have given me my very own red band to be an official kindness ninja. What do you say, guys? Am I ready? Yeah! Dana Roberts, CTV News, Dowling.
And of course, the actions of our kindness ninjas were recognized locally, provincially, and nationally, including a Maclean's Magazine July 2019 article, quote, "The world is broken and human kindness is the only solution." So when we forge strong relationships and build resiliency, we support success in learning and in life. On pages 18 and 19, we honor diversity and enhance cultural understanding. In our future story about the signing of the Education Service Agreement with the First Nations community served by the board. As we gather to celebrate the renewal of the Education Service Agreement, we also formally launched the Truth and Reconciliation, a commitment to action plan. In April 2017, Rainbow District School Board passed a motion acknowledging the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and committing to key recommendations as they relate to education. In an effort to achieve these outcomes, the board hosted a series of consultations through 17-18 to create an action plan. The Truth and Reconciliation, a commitment to action plan, is currently being implemented. Priorities focus on 4 key areas. Let's join CTV News at the signing ceremony and launch of the Truth and Reconciliation, a commitment to action plan.
Education agreement that has been reached for members of the Anishinaabe Nation in Ontario.
This ensures that Indigenous communities can have cultural and language instruction in schools, and today it was renewed by the Rainbow District School Board and several Sudbury area First Nations. CTV's Molly Fromer reports.
10 First Nation partners from Northern Ontario put their signatures on this renewal of the Education Service Agreement with the Rainbow District School Board.
We have very similar visions in that we want our kids to graduate, and we're just very fortunate that we have this mutual desire in order to see our children go through a system that has a good opportunity to make sure that we have kids coming out of the school system that are graduates and that are very productive.
The First Nations trustee says this agreement is not only for the students to achieve higher graduation rates, but to also improve the relationship between Indigenous communities and the Rainbow District School Board.
Inclusion of our language and our culture and our traditions into the curriculum, as well as ensuring that the services are being done in a positive and good way for the benefit of our students.
And new this year, a combined effort between the Rainbow District School Board and First Nations was launched. It's a plan called Truth and Reconciliation, Commitment to Action.
There are very unique concerns and challenges, and we recognize that as a board, and we said, so let's find out really what is it within our own community that we're looking for, and what are the things we can do together in order to facilitate some of the concerns and the challenges that were associated with Truth and Reconciliation.
Everybody has a responsibility to that implementation. It's not a one-sided coin. It's based on collaboration, reconciliation, trust, and truth.
The Commitment to Action is a 5-year plan, and it hopes to address 4 areas: Indigenous knowledge, Anishinaabe language, Indigenous culture, and race relations and healing. Molly Fromer, CTV News, Sudbury.
We now turn to the Parent Involvement Committee. And as we focus on valuing student, staff, parent, guardian, and partner voice. A conference organized for parents by parents drew an enthusiastic audience on a Saturday in June. The conference, made possible with a Parents Reaching Out regional grant from the Ministry of Education, focused on empowering parents to raise resilient children. Keynote speaker, Dr. Adele LaFrance, shared lessons learned and talked about the importance of harnessing the power of caregivers. In addition to the keynote, participants took part in workshops led by Rainbow District School Board's mental health team and educators. The workshops spanned developmental stages, appealing to caregivers of children of all ages and grades. Also in this section of the annual report, we highlight the professional learning day that focused on equity and inclusion. We end our features under Touching Hearts with Celebrate Student, Staff, School, and System Success. Students from Rainbow District Schools returned home from national and international science fairs with impressive awards, putting Sudbury's youth at the forefront of scientific discovery. Science North held a special celebration to honor our young scientists. Let's join Sudbury.com.
It's a great pleasure to welcome you today to celebrate this incredible success and the experiences of our top Sudbury Regional Science Fair winners who went to the Canada-wide Science Fair and or to the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair.
Yeah, I can't tell you how proud we are of our students, and not only our students, but also the schools in which they represent, and of course the board, and of course the parents that supported them along the way. So it's just been so inspiring, and you know, you look for those moments in time where you can look back and say, boy, we had an impact, and these kids are living examples of what we could do potentially on a year-to-year basis. So we're just extremely proud of our students and the support they receive from the City of Sudbury.
So what I did for my project is I developed a heater that heats windshield washer fluid for your car windshield, which will then be sprayed on the windshield and melt ice and snow during snowstorms, freezing rain, and all kinds of stuff like that. It's controlled two ways, either wirelessly through your phone or through a push-button switch with a timing circuit board that automatically will shut it off. And the wireless way has an app that will shut it off automatically.
And what inspired this project?
My parents, they complain a lot, and they drive to work a lot, so, and I'm usually the one sent down in the morning to de-ice the car to go to school, so I thought there must be a better way to do this. So I have installed it in my dad's spare car, and I am working on installing it right now in his pickup and my mom's Expedition.
So how has their response been to the product?
They love it. They love it, absolutely, and they're never buying a car again unless I put it in.
I mean, it really, really intrigues me in that kids are very focused on being socially conscious and trying to make sure things work and that will benefit families, benefit kids, benefit our lifestyles. So it's kind of neat over the years to see how things have evolved, so we're very pleased about that.
So my project was a neuropsychiatric wearable system that used cognitive behavioral therapy to treat mental illness. So I built a wearable that measured a user's heart rate, skin tension, and skin temperature, and linked these physical symptoms to various aspects of major depressive and general anxiety disorder, then sent these physical responses using Bluetooth to an Android app that I created, and into which I incorporated machine learning algorithms, which fed off the data produced, established a baseline for the user, and was thereby able to create a biofeedback loop, which utilized cognitive behavioral therapy to help the user treat and diagnose their illness. The main sort of processing behind my project was the fact that mental illness is so prevalent in our society, and that there are so many barriers that face easy access to mental health treatment, as well with cost, resources, and accessibility being the main factors. And I really wanted to create a system for mental health treatment that was accessible to a wide demographic of people and something that could be applicable in everyday life.
these are kids that will someday have a major impact, whether it's environmental science or whether it's with dark matter. So I mean, there's so many opportunities for these kids going forward, and I think we're the benefactors of that, and that's what makes us really exciting. The fact that they're from Sudbury and the fact that they will have their footprint at an international level.
So my project is about using machine learning to detect dark matter. So dark matter is a mysterious and so far undetected form of matter that is thought to exist because of some large-scale observations of gravitational effects that have been observed. So many experiments are being developed in the efforts of directly detecting dark matter. However, this is difficult because if it exists, it interacts only very rarely with regular matter. So one of the key challenges associated with these experiments is the fact that it can be difficult to distinguish what particles are dark matter and which are background radiation, which is naturally occurring and comes from sources such as radioactive atoms. In my project, I've developed new methods based on machine learning and neural networks to make this more efficient and more accurate. So I'm developing classifiers using machine learning, which is a piece of software that takes attributes of an event that is recorded and predicts whether that event is dark matter or background radiation. And machine learning refers to methods which can learn from data rather than being manually programmed. So I'm taking past data from these experiments and using that to train a classifier to predict whether future particles that are detected are actually dark matter or not. So I was inspired, well, I've always been interested in astrophysics. I found it absolutely fascinating, the many different experiments that physicists are using to try and find out what the universe is made of. So I was really inspired by this and thought it would be amazing if I could somehow contribute to this incredible field. Additionally, I've been doing machine learning for a number of years, and I saw some new applications in this field that are quite different from what's most commonly done with machine learning. Science fairs are incredible because, you know, in school you go through a fairly prescribed curriculum that, you know, you learn a specific set of topics, and this is good. But what science fair gives you the opportunity to do is, in addition to what you learn in school, to pick something that you find interesting and to dive very deep and develop your own project. And really, I've found that the process of learning by trial and error and experimenting and doing all these things teaches you so much more than you could ever learn in a classroom.
So as you can see, innovation is alive and well in Rainbow Schools, evident by the depth and breadth of topics that the students explored. On pages 24 through to 36, the 2018-19 annual report concludes with EQAO data, highlights of the current board budget, our 2019 award recipients, scholarship winners, Ontario scholars, and a current directory. In closing, I would like to commend trustees for their leadership and thank staff, students, and parents and guardians for their ongoing support. 2018-19 was another school year filled with pride and promise. It will be a pleasure to share this annual report with the Minister of Education and the community. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the valued contributions of program and spec ed staff, as they significantly influence the look and the feel of this report. And of course, I want to extend a huge note of thanks to Nicole and her team, i.e. Jan Bata, for continuing to deliver an outstanding annual report. Your work is truly valued, and thank you so much, Madam Chair.
So thank you very much, Director Blazek. Comments, Trustee Morrison?
Very brief comment through you, Madam Chair, to Director Blazek. Thank you very much, Director Blazek, and thank you, Nicole, and your team. Jennifer, thank you. This is a product that it's produced every year, and I'm glad we've gone to the digital way, so we're killing a few less trees. I just want to say, every year when this comes out, Norm, this makes me really proud to be in any way associated with Rainbow. So thank you for that result of that project. And I personally really like the hot links to the interviews, both MCTV, any other live interviews with the students that are involved with those various activities. That too brings, for me, learning to life. I cried during the Kindness Ninja, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one sitting at the table that had tears in their eyes. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure each one of us sitting around this table is very appreciative of the report itself you do a fabulous job, Nicole, as does Jennifer, working with you. Our staff, starting with the staff that is in this building and in all of our buildings, they make us look good. But even more important, they really do reach minds and touch hearts. So thank you to all of them on your behalf. The OBSPA Labor Relations and Human Resources Symposium is coming up in January, I believe it is. Oh, April. That the board approve the attendance of the following trustees at the OBSPA Labor Relations and Human Resources Symposium 2020 in Toronto, April 30th to May 1st, 2020. And do we have anyone that is planning to go? Trustee Stringer, Trustee Cosmerly, Trustee Gibson, Trustee Morrison, Trustee Hunda. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. I skipped Bob. Trustee Clement. Yes, Trustee Morrison.
Heather, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to attend, but I'm putting my name forward to make sure that I get approval in case I am able to attend. Do we know about, is it like late February probably before? Okay. For confirmation of hotel, because I don't want to cost the board money, so I'm just wondering. Thank you, Heather.
Actually, I was going to, mention the fact that the hotel accommodations have changed and they're asking for confirmation, and they're not going to return the money if we back out. And it used to be like 48 hours and now it's weeks, 6 weeks ahead of time. So, be very sure that we notify Heather in time. I need a mover and a seconder. I don't believe I did that yet. So moved by Trustee Dubosky, seconded by Trustee St. Jean. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Request for leave of absence, there's none. Oh, it's the student trustee, I'm sorry. Yes, motion that Colleen Govro be granted a leave of absence from the December 10th, 2019 board meeting, moved by Trustee Hunda, seconded by Trustee Cosmerly. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Director's remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few notes. I wanted to bring forward tonight we will be making some administrative transfers as they are necessary starting January 6, 2020. Sudbury Secondary and Levack Public both have vacancies as a result of a leave and a retirement. The leave is a maternity leave, so someone had a young baby, young Harper, as a lovely addition to the secondary family over at Sudbury Secondary. And of course, we have a retirement, and that is Enza McEachran over at Levack Public School. So backfills at those schools, the two schools have to take place because they create vacancies, of course. And so in order to complete those backfills, we did have to beg and borrow. And so that creates some voids too. So we'll get to that in a second. So in order to fill the void at the Levack Public School, Vice Principal Darren Wilson is appointed as acting principal at Levack Public School effective January 6th, 2020. That creates a vacancy, and because Darren does come from LaSalle, so we will have acting Vice Principal Jamie Bouchard transferring as acting VP at LaSalle Secondary School starting January 6th. Of course, and ending on June 26, 2020. Of course, with Jamie leaving Northeastern, that creates a vacancy there. So Lisa Puttister, who is a teacher there, will be appointed as acting VP of Northeastern for that same period of time, February 3rd to June 26th. At the secondary situation, again, this is as a result of Heather Downey being on leave. We have Vice Principal David Bertram being appointed as acting principal of Sudbury Sec, effective February 3rd until June 26, 2020. Of course, his move to Sudbury Sec creates a vacancy at Lively, in which case Kyle Gutcher will be appointed as acting VP of Lively District Secondary School effective February 3rd, ending June 26th. Okay, so those are the changes at the mid-level. You notice there's lots of actings, and again, as I've alluded to in the past, actings are there to protect all of our employee groups because we do have a number of schools that will be consolidated in the very near future. So. Also, I just wanted to remind everybody, we continue to work with employee groups, more specifically OSSTF and EDFO. Communication with both groups has been very helpful as we move through these provincial negotiations. So I just wanted to remind folks that we continue to share information letters on our RDSB website in order to keep our stakeholders in the know. Okay, so you won't be seeing letters come home, should be checking the websites. Okay. As well, on Thursday, December the 5th, on an annual basis, it seems now, RDSB has launched its version of the Edgar Burton's Helping Kids campaign. Principal Carrie Monahan held a news conference at McLeod Public School, which featured Q92 morning host Melanie Dahl. Mel interviewed students and dignitaries on live radio, creating a really festive atmosphere, one filled with hope and a genuine desire to help families in need. Valet representatives, Dan Exelon, the executive director with the Sudbury Food Bank, the mayor, Brian Bigger, and myself were on hand to watch students from McLeod Public School kickstart the campaign. The goal, to surpass over 280,000 cans of food that was raised last year, so they need, I think it's approximately 281,780 to be exact if we want to get over that from last year. And of course, $43,000 from last year, so they want to get over that amount as well. So they had a wonderful start to this initiative, and just so you know, at the time we were there, they had these two huge bake tables, and they were selling donated food as we were speaking on the radio, and that was started at 8 o'clock in the morning. So they were off to a really ferocious pace in terms of trying to accumulate dollars for such a worthy cause. Finally, if you have a chance, please visit your schools during their Christmas luncheons. Many schools have a traditional Christmas meal and provide all students with an opportunity to eat with their friends and enjoy the festivities of the year together. So to that end, I wish everyone a happy holiday, and we will see you again in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll call on the OBSPA delegate, Trustee Clement. OBSPA Director. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This past 23rd, 24th, 25th, I was in Toronto. It was a long 3 days. We started on Saturday this time with the Northern Delegates meeting casually Saturday night, and then we started Sunday morning with the rest of the boards all day, right into the evening. And then we met the next day. It was called Advocacy Day. And that day, we were all booked to meet with MPPs. We went to Queen's Park, and we got to have two of us representing different boards, and then we met with different MPPs. And we got to talk about the boards in general, about what we advocate for, the Indigenous file that we were mentioning before, and the mental health piece, and they were all NDP people. So unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to meet with any conservatives, but they were all on our side, of course. But so we tried to get our point across. One of the MPPs couldn't make the meeting, but he managed to make our social at 5 o'clock for a free social. So we got to talk to him there. The timing was very good. Our board has had a lot of questions to the government that they've been asking, And so they hired Nick Nanos to put out a Nanos poll for us. And the headline of it through the Nanos poll said, Ontarians are twice as likely to say spending money on public education is more important than eliminating the deficit. And that came in at 90%. So the poll is online. The whole advocacy day is online through OPSPA. Another question that we had, I just want to point out here, is there's a huge rumor out there, the Conservative government, when we talked about amalgamating our boards into one board, well, they're trying to maybe use the Quebec model that they might be coming out with, and that is eliminating boards altogether. So trustees, one of the questions was here, electing or appointing school board trustees came in at around 89%. So they should come in also. So it's an education piece that I think this poll showed that Canadians have to, Ontarians have to get behind. But give you an example, when we went to one of the meetings, they all have executive secretaries, and when we walked in, we shook hands with the secretary, and he said, "So, are you appointed or elected?" And we just looked at each other and we're going, "Are you serious?" So maybe there is an education piece for Ontarians to understand more about trustees, because that was an eye-opener. But all in all, we thought it was a tiring 3 days, but I think we managed to get a lot done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustees' remarks and questions. Trustee Cosmerly, and then Trustee Morrison, and then Trustee Hunda. Oh, and Trustee Stringer. Trustee Cosmerly?
All kinds of us. Along with Trustee Stringer and Trustee St. Jean, I attended the Ontario Council for Exceptional Children annual conference in Toronto, November 29th and 30th. It's an incredible conference. I think we're still the only board that sends trustees, and it's really unfortunate because trustees are the ones who set direction for their board, and you can learn so much at these conferences with respect to the whole special ed piece. But I wanted you just to know it was excellent. I was especially enjoyed a presentation on visual and auditory processing on day one. And on day two, there was an excellent presentation on neuroplasticity and cognitive functioning, and on inclusive classrooms, the role of the educational assistant in an inclusive classroom. A whole training program has been put together on this particular topic by a board in Southern Ontario. I have my notes if I ever get them typed up. Anyone is welcome to see my notes if they want. I wanted to say as well, we all got a copy of the Special Education in Ontario Schools 7th edition as part of our package, and Dr. Sheila Bennett, who is there and who I love a lot. She is incredible. She's done so much exceptional work in inclusion, has indicated that if we want extra copies to write to her, and she will send them to us. Thank you.
The hands.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I also enjoyed immensely the 63rd Ontario Council for Exceptional Children's annual Special Education Conference in Toronto. And I have notes I'm putting together that I'd be very happy to share with everyone or anyone. Just let me know. I think what I'll just do is mention a few of the presentations that I attended, just the titles, and that might interest some of you to ask me for the notes. There was a presentation on, first of all, a ministry update on special education, a ministry presentation on after-school skills development programs for students with autism, a ministry presentation supporting students with disabilities in reading, an update on progress and findings of the LD pilot project in Ontario. I went to a presentation on the new guidelines on assessment and diagnosis of learning disabilities in Ontario. Cognitive functioning and neuroplasticity in education, which Judy and I both, or Trustee Cosmerly and I both attended and quite enjoyed. and redefining the role of the educational assistant in facilitating inclusion and independence. So just an awesome conference, and I'm happy to share notes.
Thank you very much. Trustee Gibson?
Thank you, Chair Dewar. I just had a brief question about the Parents Reaching Out grants. I know that the ministry's made some changes, but I couldn't actually find anything in writing with any details, and I've had a couple of questions. So do we know what that's going to look like going forward, just briefly?
So we received just over $9,000 for the entire board. I believe about 6 weeks ago I put out an application to all schools for principals to work with their school councils to apply for a Parent Reaching Out grant, and I said that the maximum a school could have would be $1,000. So that would be splitting the $9,000 9 ways. We received 13 applications and decided that we would fund each application. So we shared all of the applications that had come in with the Parent Involvement Committee last week. Yeah, so we shared with the committee last week all of the Parent Reaching Out grants or grant applications, and decided that we would fund each of them. So we have the job of finding a few extra $1,000 to make sure that we can cover all those grants.
Thank you very much. Perfect.
Trustee Morrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first want to thank our fellow trustees who attended that conference, our exceptional children, on reporting back. Thank you. I appreciate that. And there are a couple of items there that of interest, so you can expect to hear more. And I promise I'll treat it better than the book you just lent me, Judy. Thank you. Couple of quick things. I am going to be attending one of the seasonal feasts that are at, and this one is Churchill's, which has been rescheduled to Friday. This was normally had this in October around Thanksgiving. This is their harvest feast, but it was canceled at the time because of labor dispute at the time. So the fact that I just want to commend again, given all the stuff that's going on, and particularly this time of year, they also are doing a Christmas concert. The fact that staff and students really are putting together a meal for 500 kids on Friday at 2 sittings is pretty amazing. And I know there are other trustees around the table who are also going to their schools to attend those events. So that's a wonderful thing. The other quick thing I just want to mention is I had the honor a couple of weeks ago to attend a citizenship ceremony representing the board. I'd done that before, but it had been a couple of years, and I think it was 3 years ago was the last one that I attended. And at that time, I can't help myself. That was right after the American election, and there was probably, out of the 88 people, I think, that year that took their citizenship, there was at least 50 who were Americans. Many of them had been here for a number of years, but now decided to make the switch at that particular date. This one was very different, I have to say. There was more than 100 people that took the oath at Cambrian College, and I got to retake my oath as well, and I always love that part. But they came from over 100 countries as well. And the other thing that I noticed was the numbers of families with young kids, which was a good news thing as somebody representing the public board standing there, seeing lots of them with kids taking the oath as well. There were multiple families. So I just wanted to pass on, and it was a great honor to attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Honda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know it's getting late. I just want to take a few minutes to kind of echo some of the things I've heard about around the table tonight. I never get tired of thanking our staff for their endless commitment to our children. I know every year in September, my kids are tired of hearing me say that it's September, it's Halloween, it's Christmas. It's crazy. These first 3 months go crazy, I think, for any of us involved in education, and certainly for myself, it's been like that this year, particularly around sports. Since September, I've had an amazing experience going to tournaments, helping out, and getting involved in a lot of the parent involvement around what it takes, all the work that it takes to put on, not only to coach, but to book tournaments, to book it's just an incredible lot of work, and I want to give full credit. The last one was just the other day for the board's volleyball. I would have to think. I have one day I went from Lively for one kid was in basketball, and the other team that I help out was at Northeastern. So I actually got stuck and missed. I only got 2 games that whole day because I got stuck in traffic. But it's amazing how dedicated our staff is, and I want to give a lot of credit to that. And we also have a lot of really great parents that volunteer, and I think that it's that commitment that makes it all possible. And on that note, I just want to say, with the opportunity to talk to staff, to kids, and particularly to parents, how excited a lot of these people are, particularly at this time of year, to see that our year-round indoor sports complex is up, because they're very excited that, like, our soccer season is like ridiculously short. Like, I think it was 1 game and then a tournament, and these kids work so really, really hard, but they would love to maybe expand that a little. So parents are excited, the kids are excited. I know that we around this table are excited. And on that note, I want to thank everyone too for the concerts that are coming up. Please go to your Christmas concerts if you get a chance. It's the thing that helps me get into the Christmas spirit every year, because I get kind of overloaded and a little bit grumpy at this time of year. But I go and I see these kids, and it puts me in the Christmas spirit. I have about 4 coming up in the next few days. I want to thank and congratulate Sudbury Secondary for the amazing job they did with Alice in Wonderland, and our own last year's student trustee, Hannah Golden, had a nice big starring role as the Queen of Hearts and did an incredible job, and was very pleased with herself, as was her mother and me. It was an incredible production, as they always do, and I've started a new tradition with every one of my youngest daughter, and now my grandchildren. This is the 3rd one, that we look at these plays as a date night for Nanny and the grandchildren. They get a love of theater. So I want to thank Sudbury Secondary for that. And finally, I want to thank the staff and the tech staff at Sudbury Secondary again as well for all the incredible work they did for the telethon, which they do every year. It is a lot of work, but those kids volunteer a lot of their time and work, and I really enjoyed it. Any of you that watched it, I'm sure, thought it was incredible. And I want to thank them again, because it's a big commitment. They do a lot of work, and they do a fabulous job. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you very much. Trustee St. Jean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it was also a pleasure to represent the board at the Conference for Exceptional Children with my colleagues. But earlier that same week, I had the honor of being appointed to sit on the Minister's Council for Exceptional Children. And there was one of the key highlights from that meeting was the presentation from School Mental Health Ontario. So I did bring a handout if anybody wanted to borrow it to review it, of a number of different resources and some updates on the vast amount of work that's being developed and disseminated throughout the province to help support the mental health initiatives that are going forward. Also, I have a hard copy of a presentation that was mentioned from one of the CEC conference sessions, but it was presented at the minister's table for supporting students with learning disabilities. It's the data report from a lot of the work that's being done currently in several pilot projects throughout the province. I believe we host at least one of the pilot projects from the study. So if anybody wanted to borrow that report as well. But I look forward to continuing to be involved with the table and representing students who are blind and partially sighted throughout the province. So it was exciting.
Thank you very much. Trustee Clement.
Sorry, I just saw these wonderful cards here in front of me, and I have to say I'm sorry I was a little tardy this year. And I just want to wish everybody a very happy Merry Christmas. And also, it's going to be a nice Christmas for us this year. Our newest addition to the family, our 6-week-old young boy, Penn, will be coming to our house for Christmas this year, so that's going to be great.
Good.
So Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you very much. The festive season is one of the most wonderful times of the year in Rainbow Schools, as students and staff spread holiday cheer in many different ways. I just can't believe the number of initiatives that our staff and our students take on. Everything from food to keeping, to warm clothing, to collecting funds and so on, canned food drives, acts of kindness, carols and concerts. That really means a lot to a lot of people, as Trustee Hunda mentioned. Turkey and the trimmings, Santa and Spirit Days, hats, scarves, and mitts for families in need. For a listing of the plethora of festive events at 27 different schools in the Rainbow family, please visit our website, rainbowschools.ca. The thought for this month is a repeat from the well-known and dearly loved How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Quote, "It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more." On behalf of the board, I would like to wish all our students, parents, and guardians, staff, and community partners a happy, healthy holiday season. I look forward to working with each of you in the new year. Stay safe. May 2020 bring you peace and joy. Thank you very much. Take a moment and take a look. There are 2 sets of minutes from the Parent Involvement Committee. Nothing under non-staff, but I have been posting on correspondence to the chair. I have received different items which I keep posting there. So if you have a chance, take a quick look. Future meetings, would you take a moment and go through those meeting dates and times, and hopefully they are correct. If you do discover a change that needs to be made, please make sure you get a hold of Heather. And now I'd like the motion to adjourn, that we do now adjourn, moved by Trustee Morrison, seconded by Trustee Clement. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.